I don't know if this is paranormal, but I'm not entirely sure where to post this. My friend and I had a strange experience tonight. After feeling down tonight, my friend offered to give me a facial at her work. She's a massage therapist. It's quite a gloomy night. It's pitch black out. The wind is blowing hard and it's raining, lightly on and off. My friend and I were driving home after the facial in different cars. As we both live in a similar area in town, we took the same route down this hill. As I head over the peak of it, a bright blue light lit up the entire sky. It was the color of an emergency vehicle lights, minus the red, and it lit up the whole sky. All of the street lights went out. It lasted for maybe a second. I thought that maybe it was lightning, but I didn't hear any thunder, and the sky didn't light up again or have any other lightning strikes for the rest of the drive home. When I got home, I messaged my friend about it. She saw the same thing as I did, except all the lights in her car went out at the same time too. None of the lights in the houses went out, just the street lights. And after that second, they all came back on. It was really strange. Has anyone else experienced this before or know what it is? This story gets a bit dark towards the end. That part is not about the ghostly experiences, but I couldn't write it without a border context. I lived in northern Maine during my senior year in high school. It's rural and a very different lifestyle than I was used to. My father bought a very old and small farmhouse along the border of Canada. The house was a 2-story wood frame with a sad porch, peeling paint, and a connected barn that was falling down. It was depressing. Creepy house with small rooms and an abundance of flies, spiders, and in the fall, many ladybugs. In the no longer used outhouse in the barn, we found a ratty, full-length bearskin coat. My father thought it was some sort of treasure, but I found it disturbing. The stairs to the barn loft were heavily chewed by porcupines, especially on the corners where they could easily bite. There was no actual central heating in the house. This is one of the coldest areas of the country, where temperatures would drop to minus 30 Fahrenheit in the winter. In the basement, there was an enormous wood-burning stove that had been fabricated by a former owner. Managed properly, it would heat the entire house, sort of. I got used to being cold all the time. It was always uneasy in that house. After we had been living there for a while, my father and his girlfriend would mention that they would have these strange experiences. They'd be lying in bed or on the couch and feel what they thought was a cat walking across their feet on top of the blankets. When they looked down, there was nothing there. They both mentioned this several occasions, and it became a recurring theme. They would report that it would often happen when they were asleep, and sometimes it would be something touching their head or their hair. One time my father was sitting on the toilet and felt something cold firmly press against his bare thigh, or so he said. During the winter sometimes, my father mentioned at dinner one evening he had seen a figure in the early morning hours that day. He had awakened in the night and was startled to see a woman standing next to his bed. She was leaning close to him and just looking at him. When he woke up, she moved away and stood by the window looking out at the dooryard. Then she faded away. It was just beginning to get light outside, and he could see her from the faint pale light coming in through the window. He described her as a woman around 35 to 40 and wearing a long dress. a little while after I had moved away and gone back to Massachusetts. I got an excited call from my friend Jennifer in Maine, whom I knew from high school. I had told her at some point about the odd things that happened in the house. She had been talking to someone on the day she called me, and somehow I came up in the conversation, and the guy she was talking to said, "Oh, that house he used to live in is haunted. My cousin lived there several years ago. She said that you'd be lying in bed at night and you'd feel someone touch your hair." That independent corroboration freaked her out, and she couldn't wait to tell me about it. I felt the phantom touch once, I think, on my feet, but that was really the extent of it. Other than the awful, creepy, depressing aspect of the entire house, I would be home alone a lot there, and even in the daytime, I would get scared in that house. More than 20 years later, I returned to the area. While on vacation with my wife, I used to see the house again and show her where I had lived. So we drove the 12 miles south from Holton on US 1 to Wilcox Settlement Road. The house was still there, but it had gotten even creepier. Most of the siding had been torn off in an apparently abandoned project to add insulation to the thin walls. There was junk strewn about, an old battered pickup truck set in the dooryard. It made me feel so sad to see the house in even worse condition than it was when I had lived there. We stared at the house from the road where we had stopped. The car was idling in gear at the end of the driveway as we were taking in the scene. Where the house had seemed forlorn in 1987, in 2006 it had become an eyesore. The house had always seemed to me like a place where bad things might happen to someone. And because it was in a quite sparsely populated and densely forested place, those things and the person they happened to might be forgotten, or at least never mentioned again, by the terms of the silent agreement of familial shame. Suddenly a movement in the dooryard caught my eye. There was a man standing between the pickup truck and the front door, and he was watching us. I couldn't believe that we hadn't seen him. A disheveled, overweight man in a brown outdoor jacket. He was smiling and nodding his head, slowly, and waving his arm in a sweeping, beckoning motion, encouraging us to come closer. He didn't approach us or look at us with suspicion. He was silent, just nodding, smiling, beckoning. "Come closer. That's right. Closer." I pressed the gas pedal to the floor and sped off. The road more or less dead-ended a short ways down, where the pavement petered out. I knew this, but had kind of driven off in a panic and had to turn around and drive past the house again. I don't remember seeing the man on the second pass, or if we even looked. I don't know why he was waving unexpected at out-of-staters in his dooryard in the waning daylight. But at the time I assumed that it had something to do with making sausages and grimy meat pies. Maybe it's not a place. Maybe it's not a place itself that's bad. Maybe it's that a place gets marked with an indelible psychic strain that becomes smeared and darkened with repeated abuse and horrors, a depression in which negative feelings and energy enswirl and engulf those who come in contact with it. I feel that it was already darkly stained when we arrived, and while we were there it became darker still. I don't know what it would take to erase stains like that. Sometimes you visit a place from your past seeking catharsis, but it just tears off the scab and rubs dirt in the wound. I'll never visit that place again, but I don't think it will ever leave me. I worked for a haunt walk tour in Upper Michigan. Most of the time we didn't experience anything on the tours, and we had to hype not exactly true stories that would happen on the tour. What I'm about to scrawl out for you is true, and it scared the hell out of me. I befriended one of the tour guides, and we often went on little ghost hunts because we were bored. We used all the fun tech on our ventures. Friends from Illinois were visiting, and I knew one of them was into the paranormal. I asked the tour guide to take us on a private tour. We hit up most of the local hot spots, and when we were passing the cemetery, I told them about the tombstone of a friend that I frequently visited just to unload my worldly burdens onto. The tour guide asked if we wanted to see if he would talk back. We settled near the stone, and we were using a hack shack, can't remember what it's called, to communicate. We finally heard my name. The tour guide was constantly scanning the area for temperature drops. About 20 feet away was a drop of temperature. The spot was 40. It was middle of summer. I was instructed to take the ghost box and stand in the area. As I did, the voice became more clear. After about 5 minutes, I felt a cold step on my foot, and then it turned into a normal 75-degree night. After that night, I was tortured by terrible nightmares that would happen on a 2-week basis. I can't tell you what they were about because it happened when I was a teen, but I do remember they didn't stop until I went back to the graveyard. My friend informed me that I was speaking to was not the spirit of a dearly departed, but that of one of 3 demonic presences of the area. He explained to me that ghosts don't typically haunt graveyards. The next couple weeks were rough. My mental health had declined. I was fighting with my parents. My friends had distanced themselves from me, and my significant other and I broke up. My tour guide and I would go to the outskirts of the graveyard with his lover. No, I didn't know they were sleeping together at this time. And all the equipment. We made it at a point to enter the graveyard again. We were 36 minutes in until the lover suggested he had heard the location of the tour guide's apartment. Just like my other friends, they had abandoned me. The next years, I moved around a lot, affecting my mental health and physical health. When I went back to the graveyard, next was to bury my father in 2017. Afterwards, I had this feeling of warmth, and as if a great weight was off my shoulders. I remain friends with the tour guide, and we talk every now and then. I'm doing a lot better. I've got a great job and fantastic fiancé. I'm healthy and have surrounded myself with people who love and support me. I haven't thought of the experience until I saw a thread on here.